You are sitting at your kitchen table during tax season staring at a W-2 and realizing that the government just took a huge chunk out of your year. You spent late nights, gave up weekends, handled stress for 12 months, and at the end of it, all you discover that for 3 or 4 of those months, you were basically working for free just to hand money over to Uncle Sam. That creates a strange mix of frustration and acceptance, because most of us were taught to believe that paying taxes is simply the cost of living in a civilized society. Then you open your phone and see a headline about a billionaire paying a lower tax rate than you do. You see tech founders and real estate moguls living extravagant lifestyles while reporting almost no income to the IRS. It feels wrong. It feels unfair. It feels like the system is rigged. And here is the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. The system is rigged, but not in the way most people think. It is not rigged because the wealthy are constantly breaking laws. It is rigged because they are playing an entirely different game with a different set of rules than the ones you were taught in school. Most people believe wealth comes from working hard, earning a high salary, and saving whatever is left after taxes. But the wealthy know that earned income is the most heavily taxed money on earth. They know that trying to get rich from salary alone is like trying to run a marathon while carrying a backpack full of bricks. Today, we are going to break down the exact mechanism the top 1% uses to sidestep the tax system almost completely. It is called buy, borrow, die. By the end of this video, you will understand why your high salary might actually be a trap, and how you can begin applying billionaire-style thinking even if you do not have $1 billion. We are going to break down each stage of this strategy and show you how to move from being a tax victim to a tax strategist. To understand why the rich pay so little in taxes, you first have to understand the difference between the way you get paid and the way they get paid. When you earn a salary, that money gets taxed immediately before it even lands in your bank account. The federal government takes its share. The state takes its share. Social Security takes its share. What is left is what you use to survive, pay bills, and try to build a life. Financial experts call this the W-2 trap. You trade time for money, and then that money gets hit with the highest possible tax rates. Wealthy people do not trade time for money. They trade money for assets. That brings us to the first part of the strategy, buy. The wealthy are not obsessed with income. They are obsessed with net worth. They use capital to buy assets that go up in value, like stocks, real estate, or businesses. This is the part most people miss. When you buy a stock or a piece of property and it rises in value, you do not owe taxes on that increase until you actually sell it. That is called an unrealized gain. If you buy one share of Amazon for $100 and it rises to $1,000, you have made $900 on paper. But the IRS cannot tax that $900 yet. It can sit there compounding and growing year after year without being taxed. That is why you see headlines about billionaires whose net worth jumps by billions in a single year while they pay little or no income tax. The value is trapped inside assets, not sitting in cash in a checking account. The wealthy understand that the moment they sell, they create a taxable event. So instead of selling, they keep letting the snowball roll. That leads to the obvious question. If all their money is locked up in assets, how do they pay for the yachts, the mansions, the groceries, and everything else? If their wealth is just numbers on a screen, how do they turn it into spending power? That is where the second and maybe smartest phase comes in, borrow. This is the part that challenges everything most people believe about debt. We are taught that debt is bad. We are taught that debt is dangerous. We are taught that debt is slavery. And for many people, that is true. But for the wealthy, debt is not a burden. It is a tool. It is a tax-free way to access wealth. Instead of selling stock and triggering a massive tax bill, wealthy people go to the bank and borrow against their assets. This is often called a securities-backed line of credit. The bank sees a portfolio worth $10 million and says, "Fine, we will lend you $5 million because we know you have more than enough assets to back it up." Here is the trick. Loan money is not taxable income. When the bank wires that $5 million, the IRS sees zero income. That is $5 million of spending power, completely tax-free. They can use it to fund a lifestyle most people can only imagine, and on paper they still look like they have no income. Then comes the question about interest. Yes, they pay interest, but the math works heavily in their favor. If they borrow at 3% or 4%, but their portfolio keeps growing at 8% or 10%, they are making money on the spread. Their borrowed money helps fund their life, while their own money stays invested and keeps compounding. That is positive arbitrage. In other words, they are effectively getting paid to borrow money and live their lives. Compare that to the average person who pays 30% or 40% in taxes on earned income and then tries to invest whatever is left. The wealthy skip the tax step entirely and keep their capital working around the clock. Then we get to the last stage of the strategy: die. That sounds harsh, but estate planning is where the final major tax advantage happens. The question is what happens to all the debt and all the assets when the wealthy person dies. Do the heirs inherit a mess? Not exactly. Under current tax law, something powerful happens called the step-up in basis. This is one of the biggest tax loopholes in the system. Here is a simple example. Suppose your grandmother bought stock 50 years ago at $10 per share, and today that same stock is worth $500 per share. If she sold it before she died, she would owe capital gains tax on the $490 gain. But if she dies and leaves it to you, the cost basis resets to the current market price. The IRS treats it as though you bought it for $500. That means all the capital gains tax that built up over decades disappears. You can sell that stock the next day for $500 and pay no capital gains tax. That is the power of the step-up. So now the cycle is complete. The heirs inherit the assets tax-free. They sell part of those assets to pay off any loans taken out to support the lifestyle. Because the basis was stepped up, they do not pay tax on the sale. The debt gets cleared, and the family keeps most of the wealth, ready to start the cycle again. Buy assets, borrow against them to live, die to erase the tax bill. That is the wealth engine. It is a perpetual motion machine that allows rich families to move around the tax system, while the rest of us are forced to play by the old rules. This is one reason wealth inequality keeps growing. It explains why the middle class feels like they are stuck on a treadmill while the wealthy seem to ride an elevator upward. The tax code rewards capital and punishes labor. If you work for money, you lose. If your money works for you, you win. Getting angry about that will not change your bank balance. Understanding it might. And before you think this only applies to Jeff Bezos level wealth, let's bring it back to real life. You probably cannot walk into a bank tomorrow and borrow millions against your portfolio. But the principles behind buy, borrow, die can still be applied by anyone who shifts from consumer thinking to investor thinking. The first move is to stop prioritizing low-interest debt payoff above all else and start prioritizing the accumulation of appreciating assets. Most people are obsessed with being debt-free. They throw every extra dollar at their mortgage or low-interest car loan because they think that is the path to freedom. But in many cases, they are trapping equity inside something they cannot use. They are killing their liquidity. A wealthy person would not rush to pay off a 3% mortgage early. They would keep that money and buy more assets. They would put it in an index fund or a rental property. They want their money earning 8% or 10%, not saving 3%. They understand opportunity cost. Every dollar used to pay down cheap debt is a dollar not working in the market. Look at homeownership through that lens. For the average person, the home is their biggest asset, but most people treat it like a piggy bank they are trying to fill up. The smarter way is to treat it like a bank you can borrow from. As your home rises in value, you can use a home equity line of credit, or HELOC, to access cash without selling the house. That borrowed money can then be used to buy a rental property or start a business. You are borrowing against one asset to buy another asset. You are creating a smaller version of buy, borrow, die for yourself. You are using debt to grow wealth, instead of using income just to eliminate debt. That requires a huge mental shift. You have to stop fearing debt and start respecting it as a tool. There is bad debt and there is good debt. Bad debt is borrowing to buy things that fall in value, like cars, clothes, or vacations. That is consumer debt, and it keeps people poor. Good debt is borrowing to buy assets that rise in value or generate income. Good debt can make you rich. The wealthy almost never carry consumer debt, but they do carry huge amounts of investment debt. They use leverage. They control massive amounts of assets with relatively little of their own cash. You can apply this idea in your investment portfolio too. If you have a taxable brokerage account, you may be able to access margin. That allows you to borrow against your stock holdings. This does carry risk, and you have to be careful about margin calls if the market falls too far. But used conservatively, it gives you liquidity without triggering taxes. Instead of selling stocks to make a down payment or cover an emergency, you borrow against the portfolio. You keep the stocks, you keep the growth, and you avoid capital gains tax. The trap most people fall into is the trap of liquidity. They keep everything in cash because they want easy access, but cash is a poor asset. Inflation eats it every single year. The wealthy hold almost no cash. They hold assets. And because they know how to borrow against those assets, they still have liquidity without storing value in cash. In a modern financial system, access to credit can function like cash, but it allows your net worth to grow much faster. That leads to another powerful idea: phantom income versus phantom debt. When you work a job, you have real income and real taxes. When you own assets, you can have phantom income, which is appreciation you do not pay taxes on yet. The wealthy focus on phantom income. Meanwhile, many middle-class households are sitting on phantom debt. They have things like car leases, subscriptions, and lifestyle liabilities draining their cash flow without showing up in the same obvious way on a balance sheet. You need to flip that equation. You want more assets generating invisible tax-free growth and fewer liabilities quietly draining you. Inflation is another huge part of this strategy. The buy, borrow, die model is essentially a big bet against the currency. When you borrow today, you are shorting the dollar. You borrow dollars now at one value and pay them back years later with dollars worth less because of inflation. If inflation is 3% and your interest rate is 3%, your real cost is basically zero. That is free money in practical terms. The wealthy use inflation to shrink the value of their debt while their assets rise with inflation. They are winning on both sides. The middle-class saver is losing on both sides. Their cash gets eaten by inflation, and they are not carrying the kind of smart debt that becomes cheaper over time. They are swimming upstream while the wealthy float downstream. That is why you cannot save your way to wealth in a fiat system built to inflate. You have to invest your way there, and in many cases, you need leverage to amplify the process. Of course, leverage cuts both ways. If you borrow to buy assets and those assets collapse, you can get crushed. That is why the wealthy are also obsessed with risk management. They diversify. They keep reserves. They do not over-leverage. They use debt strategically, not recklessly. You need a strong foundation before adding leverage. You need an emergency fund. You need reliable income. But once that base is in place, you cannot stay forever in safe mode and expect extraordinary results. One practical thing to think about is your retirement accounts. 401(k), S, and IRAs are useful, but they come with limitations. You cannot easily borrow against them. Wealthy people often build huge taxable brokerage accounts precisely because they are flexible. A taxable account gives you far more room to use buy, borrow, die than a retirement account where the government has more control over the rules. If you are maxing out your 401(k) but have no liquidity in a brokerage account, you may be locking yourself into a rigid structure that limits your options. Then there is tax drag. Every time you pay taxes, you reduce the power of compounding. If taxes take 30% of your gains every year over 40 years, you lose far more than 30% of your final wealth. You also lose the future growth that money would have created. The damage compounds over time. That is why the buy, borrow, die framework is so powerful. It tries to eliminate tax drag and keep capital working nonstop. Ultimately, this is about identity. You have to stop seeing yourself as only a worker and start seeing yourself as a capital allocator. A worker tries to increase salary. A capital allocator tries to grow assets. A worker tries to pay down debt. A capital allocator tries to manage debt. A worker fears the tax system. A capital allocator uses the tax system as a map. The system is not going to fix itself. Waiting for laws to become perfectly fair will keep you waiting forever. You have to understand the rules as they exist now and play intelligently. The good news is that this does not require genius. It requires discipline and patience. It takes time to build enough assets for this to work. You are not going to borrow against a $500 portfolio tomorrow. But if you spend the next 10 years buying assets instead of liabilities, you can eventually reach a point where your assets support your lifestyle. At that point, you never need to sell. You never need to realize the tax hit. You have actual financial freedom. Do not let fear of debt keep you poor. Do not let obsession with salary blind you to the power of assets. Start small. Buy your first index fund. Buy your first rental property. Keep buying. Never sell when you do not have to. And when you need cash, learn how to access it without triggering a tax bill. That is the blueprint. That is how dynastic families keep wealth across generations. It is not magic, it is math. And now that you understand the math, there is no excuse to keep playing the game the old way. Your future self is counting on you to stop working for money and start making money work for you. The tax code is built around incentives. If you do what the system rewards, like investing and building businesses, you are rewarded. If you do what the system punishes, like relying only on wages, you get taxed. Align your financial behavior with the incentives already built into the system. Stop swimming upstream. Build your pile of assets and let compound interest carry you toward wealth.